I'm super excited about what we're cooking today, as I am almost always excited for anything dill pickle. If you're a dill pickle lover, today's video is for you. I'm making dill pickle buttermilk biscuits. They're flaky, they're fluffy, but they're also incredibly tender thanks to the combo of buttermilk and pickle brine. I love to bump up the intensity of the dill pickle flavor by adding not only chopped dill pickles, but also some minced fresh dill and other delicious pickling spices. These biscuits are perfect for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and they're so easy that even a beginner can make them. Today, we are cooking with dill pickles, which is honestly probably my favorite food. I really like to take the opportunity to try to incorporate them in dishes whenever I can. I'll admit that some of them are kind of a little bit weird. I'll include a link to my pickle soup that's actually delicious that I'd highly recommend. But pickle in biscuit actually makes a ton of sense. The tanginess of the buttermilk with the briny, salty, bright pickle taste, combined with the rich butteriness of all of the butter that's in a buttermilk biscuit, it's pretty perfect. And I think you'll find that if you give these a try, they're really a crowd pleaser. The first time I heard about dill pickle biscuits, the recipe that I'll include in the description box below was sent to me by a very close pickle-loving friend. Since that time, I've tested the recipe several times and I've found my perfect dill pickle biscuit. So mine includes more than just chopped pickles, a little pickle brine, some salt and pepper. I've found that I also really like to bump up the herbs and spices, mimicking what's in a traditional dill pickle. I'm adding some chopped fresh dill, a little bit of ground coriander, and a little bit of garlic powder. Otherwise, this is a really traditional buttermilk biscuit dough with a pretty traditional method, and you don't need any special tools or equipment. I do have a cookie sheet with a silicone baking mat. The parchment paper or even a greased baking tray will work really well for you. And I have an oven that's preheated to 425. Two of the most important steps to ensure a flaky, fluffy, tender, not tough biscuit are first to keep your ingredients really cold. The buttermilk, the pickle brine, and the butter should stay cold for as long as possible. Take them out of the fridge at the very last moment to incorporate them into your dough. The second key is not to overwork your dough. So we're bringing things together, but just. And we're not spending a lot of time manipulating the dough. It's okay that we see streaks of butter through our dough and that it's not fully incorporated. That's exactly what you want. The way you get a fluffy layered biscuit is to have some whole chunks of butter, because once that dough hits the really hot oven, the chunks of butter turn to steam, and that steam expands the dough and creates a little space, which is what creates a flaky layer. So that doesn't happen if your butter goes in when it's completely melted, or you work it so much with your warm hands that it melts when it's in the dough. So with all of that said, these biscuits are actually going to come together extremely quickly, and it's time to get into them now. On the bench in front of me, I have all of our dry ingredients that we're going to whisk together first. Although now come to think of it, is chopped pickle a wet ingredient or a dry ingredient? Either way, it goes in on its own step. So in front of me, regular all-purpose flour, some salt, sugar, pepper, baking soda, baking powder, and then I have a couple mix-ins. I'm using a couple full tablespoons of minced dill and some ground coriander and garlic powder. I'm just using a little bit of each of these as I find it creates a little more pickly interest in the background of these biscuits. Okay, so our dry ingredients are mixed really well, and you can see nice little green flakes of dill running throughout, which is beautiful. So it's time to incorporate our butter and our pickles. I have about a cup-ish, I like a little bit more, but a cup-ish of chopped dill pickles, and I finely chopped these as finely as I have patience for. I like a little chunk of dill pickle, as you might imagine, but if you just want the flavor of dill, go really, really fine, and they'll just kind of meld into the background. And then I have a full cup of butter straight out of the fridge that's cut into about inch pieces. So first step is to incorporate the butter, and I'm just gonna use my hands. So all I do is take the butter out of the bowl, and remember, the goal is to try to touch this as little as possible. The heat of our hands immediately starts melting this butter. First thing I do is just toss the butter, first spill some on the bench, and then just toss the butter. So each of the chunks of butter are coated in that flour mixture. You can already smell the dill. This dough is amazing. So I toss so the butter's coated, and I just start using my thumb and forefingers, pushing them together and kind of mashing some of that butter into the flour. The goal is not to incorporate it perfectly here at all. We're trying to leave some of the bigger chunks of butter, because again, those chunks of butter, when they hit a hot oven, they steam, the dough puffs up, creates a nice flaky dough. So now, time to incorporate our pickles. So with my same floury hands, pickles go in. And again, I'm just tossing the dough together. This dough will seem really rough, really pebbly. That's perfect, it should. Okay, that's enough. I'm gonna stop playing with it. Okay, so I have some very thick buttermilk here. Just giving it a quick shake. And our wet ingredients for these biscuits are a couple tablespoons of pickle brine, and buttermilk. We're just gonna mix those two things together and mix it into the biscuit dough. I don't have a specific recommendation for pickles for these biscuits. I've done it with all of my favorites and they all work really well. I would just recommend to choose something that you like to eat to go into the biscuit, because you definitely taste pickle in these biscuits. Okay, so we're going for a cup of buttermilk and 2 solid tablespoons of pickle brine. Give those a mix. So if you don't have buttermilk or it's not an ingredient that you want to invest in, you can try these biscuits with regular milk plus a tablespoon or 2 of lemon juice. It has a similar tangy taste as buttermilk does, and it also provides some acidity to the dish, which is necessary. But if you're a fan of buttermilk biscuits, I would recommend sourcing some good buttermilk. In the US at least, you can find it at your grocery store, kind of right next to all of the rest of the milk products. Okay, so this is gonna go right in. I'm gonna create a little bit of a well in the center. I'm gonna incorporate all of this right in. If you're not used to making biscuits, this dough is gonna look really weird, really shaggy, really not mixed. That's exactly what you want. Again, we're trying not to overwork it. So when it's starting to come together but sticking to your fork a little bit, that's when I like to get in with my hands, just to kind of get some of that rogue flour incorporated. And then I pour this whole thing out right onto my bench. Look at all of the little pieces of butter that are kind of flying around. There's pickle pieces flying around. It's exactly what you want. If this dough looks really shaggy and weird, totally fine. You're on the right track. All I'm trying to do now is scoop from the bottom to the top to bring it together. I just want to bring this together in kind of one mound that will stay together. So with just a couple turns of our dough, we have something that looks like biscuit dough. So the process here to make these biscuits beautifully layered and super flaky is to do a series of cutting and stacking. So 4 times actually, I'm gonna press this out, just using my palms to press it out into a square shape that's about 1 inch thick. I'm gonna call that good. So it's not perfectly square, it's not exactly 1 inch. The whole intent is to create some layering. So what I'm gonna do is cut this into 4 equal-ish sized pieces, which is why a square is easier. And then I'm gonna stack one on top of the other. And I'm gonna repeat that process. If you've got sticky bench, continue to flour it. If you've got pieces of pickle and butter that come off, just continue to press them in. Again, we're not trying to knead, we're just trying to bring this dough together. Flatten it out, cut it, stack it, flatten it out. So that was time number 1. We're going on to time number 2. Okay, that looks great. So I'm gonna plan to get 9 biscuits. Mine are gonna be just a little bit bigger. There we go. Mine are absolutely not perfect sizes. It's totally fine. And then these are gonna go right into the fridge for a little bit of a chill. Our biscuits are almost ready to go in the oven. They were in the freezer for probably 10-15 minutes. You just want the dough to be cold. So we are just gonna top these with some melted butter and a little bit of flaky salt, and then they're gonna go right in the oven. I've also done these with a little bit of sugar on top, which seems like it might be kind of weird, but biscuits for me always kind of ride that boundary of savory and sweet, and there is a little bit of sugar in the dough, so I don't know, don't knock it till you try it. Okay, without further ado, into these oven these go, 20-25 minutes, and I'll show you what they look like when they come out. Biscuits are all done. My biscuits are quite large, which is the way I like it. If you want a taller but narrower, a taller but smaller biscuit, cut them a little bit smaller and just don't pat them down quite as much. These are perfect for me though. So, true test of a biscuit. Can you flake it off in layers? You can flake it off in layers. Looks amazing. You can see the pieces of pickle in there. Nice golden brown on the bottom. Beautiful flake. Okay, let's give it a taste. Immediately hit with dill. Immediately hit with briny, salty dilliness, which is exactly what I love in a pickle. The pickle surprisingly stays a little bit crunchy, which is perfect. I think that will vary depending on the type of pickle you use, so your mileage may vary on the crunchiness. Those extra spices are awesome. I love seeing green dill running all the way through. These are great biscuits. I would highly recommend them, especially if you're a dill pickle lover. But if you're not, this is actually a pretty decent basic buttermilk biscuit recipe. Wow, that was very hard to say. You can add different spices if you'd like. You can add different herbs if you'd like. You can leave the pickle chunks out and just add a little bit of the brine for some saltiness in the background. It's actually surprisingly versatile, especially if you remember the 2 tricks, which are keep your butter and buttermilk cold and don't overwork your dough. You are on your way to perfect biscuits. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite dill pickle recipe is, or if you hate dill pickles, you can let me know that too. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to stick around, and I really look forward to seeing you here next time. Cheers.